بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه، وبعد، فاليوم أو الليلة ليلة التاسعة من شهر ربيع الأول لعام 35 و400 وألف من الهجرة. Tonight being the ninth night, Laylat al-Jum'ah, the night preceding Jum'ah, in the month, the ninth night of the month of Rabi' al-Awwal, in the year 1435. We want to continue with our mutual benefiting from the sharh of Nukhbatul-Fikr li al-Hafiz ibn Hajar al-Asqalani بشرح Sheikh Abdul-Hakim al-Khudayr hafidhahullah ta'ala. The explanation of Nukhbatul-Fikr, or the concise thought regarding the mustalah of the people of Al-Athar, as authored by Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, who passed away in the year 852, with the explanation of Abdul-Karim, Sheikh Abdul-Karim al-Khudayr hafidhahullah ta'ala. And in the last class, first, inshallah, before going over what we went over the last class, we'll read up to what we came to so far to refresh it in our memories. So, Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar, he said, أما بعد, آسف. We reached the statement when he said, فأقول الخبر إما أن يكون له طرق بلا عدد معين أو مع حصر بما فوق الاثنين أو بهما أو بواحد منه أو بواحد. فالأول المتواتر المفيد للعلم اليقيني بشروطه، والثاني المشهور وهو المستفيض على رأيه، والثالث العزيز وليس شرطا للصحيح خلافا لمن زعم، والرابع الغريب، وكلها سوى الأول آحاد. We started last class taking the portion of the statement of Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar when he said, after his introduction, that Al-Khabar will either be that which has no limit to the amount of chains it has, or the paths that it's come from. There is no limit to the amount of paths that it's come from. Or it is a limited amount, but more than two. Or it is only two, or it is only one. So the first of them is al-mutawatir, and it benefits certainty in knowledge with all of its conditions. The second of them is known as al-mashhur, or famous, and it is also called al-mustafid, or widespread, according to some opinions. وَالثَّالِث al-aziz. The third is aziz, or rare, and it is not a condition that a hadith be this to be authentic, contradictory to those who make this claim. And the fourth of them is known as al-gharib, or strange. And all of them besides the first are what are known as ahad. So this is what we took as far as the reading portion of last class. And we finished with the statement of what is a khabar. Right? We said the khabar will either have no limit to the amount of chains it has, no limit to the amount of chains it has, or it will have a limit to the amount of chains it has. But first and foremost, what is a khabar? هل من ذاكر تذكر؟ Don't make it restricted on the Sahaba. It can be the statement of anybody, right? It can be the Prophet or anybody else, right? Right? That which is attributed to the Prophet or anybody else is a khabar, right? This is one opinion, right? What else? We said it all right. Like we said, the khabar, to make it easy, it has three possible explanations. People disagree on three opinions. The first is that the khabar means the same thing as a hadith. It's a synonym for a hadith. What's a hadith? that which is attributed to the Prophet from his statements, his actions, his agreeances, right? Or what he was described with, whether it be his characteristics or his features. Right? So this is a hadith. And they say a khabar means the same thing. So when you read the books and they say ja'a fil khabar, right? It could mean ja'a fil hadith, that this has come in an authentic hadith, or this has come in a hadith, right? Or it can mean the opposite of a hadith. Meaning the hadith is specifically what is related to the Prophet, which is attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the khabar is that which is attributed to anybody else besides him. So if you're reading a book and they say ja'a fil khabar, you know for sure it's not a hadith. Because the hadith is only the Prophet and the khabar is everybody else. The third opinion is that a khabar is more general than a hadith. So every hadith is a khabar, but not every khabar is a hadith. Meaning that a khabar means that which is attributed to anybody, but a hadith is that which is attributed specifically to the Prophet. Right? So we understand the difference between the three. There's three opinions about what a khabar is, and all of this has a point. When you read the books of people of hadith, and you get into statements and things like that, how do you refer to something? These things make a difference. So a khabar can be what? Just make it simple. A hadith. Right? The first one is a hadith. Or it can be the what? If it's not a hadith, it could be the opposite of a hadith. Right? Either it's a hadith, some scholars say a khabar is a hadith. Don't trouble yourself. A khabar, it's a hadith. Other people say no, a khabar is different than a hadith. Not opposite, but different. Meaning the hadith is only the Prophet and the khabar is everyone else. And some people say no, a khabar is more general than a hadith. Meaning that a khabar is everyone, including the Prophet, but a hadith is only the Prophet. Right? What are they, Haris? A khabar is? It's a hadith. This is one opinion. The second opinion is? Statement of everybody else. Everybody else, right? Not a hadith. That which is attributed to everyone else besides the Prophet. Or the third one? Everything else. It can be everything and the... Exactly. More general than a hadith, including everyone, including the Prophet. But a hadith is only the Prophet. Right? Tell these things to yourself. Say them out loud. A hadith, a khabar is a hadith. Right? What's a hadith? We should know this. A hadith is what is attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from his statements, or his actions, or his allowances, or what he was described with. Whether it be his outward his outward appearance, his features, or his characteristics. Right, his manners and so forth. So this is what a hadith is. But Ibn Hajar, he says the khabar is three types. It's two types. So what does he mean when he says khabar? He says a khabar can mean the same as a hadith. Right? Or it can mean something different than a hadith. Meaning the hadith is only the Prophet and a khabar is only everyone else. Or a khabar, this is opinion 2. Opinion 3 is, a khabar is a hadith and everyone else, but a hadith is only the Prophet. Right? So now, as we were saying, when Ibn Hajar says in his introduction, the khabar is two types. Which kind do you think he was talking about? Ibn Hajar, he says, Al-khabar imma an yakun lahu turuqun bila adadin mu'ayyin aw ma'a hasrin bima fawqa al-ithnayn. Right? He says he doesn't say two types, he breaks it into four. But he says the khabar will either be this or that in the third, right? What does he mean when he says khabar? Right, we said khabar means three things. Which one does Ibn Hajar mean? Ibn Hajar, he means the third one. Whether it's a hadith or something attributed to anybody else, right? Because in the science of hadith, as you're going to learn, we're going to look up more than just hadith of the Prophet. Abu Bakr said something. Will we know what that's called from the science of hadith? Right. But that's why Ibn Hajar, he said a khabar. to include those things, right? So he said the khabar will either have no limit to the paths that it comes from, right? We said that one was called mutawatir. There's no limit to the chains that it has. Or it will have a limit but be more than 3. We said that one was called mashhur. Or it will have a limit and be only 2. I'm sorry, the first one will be more than 2. The third one will have a limit and it's only 2. And we call this one aziz. Or it will have only one chain and we call this one gharib. Right? But the main thing to remember from last class is what we talked about, the definition of a khabar. And a khabar is one of 3 things. Right? Scholars disagree what they mean when they say khabar. So we'll pick back up with the explanation of Shaykh Abdul-Hakim al-Khudayr. This subject is about the science of hadith. Ibn Hajar. Right, that's what Ibn Hajar, remember Shaykh Abdul-Hakim al-Khudayr, he said last time that Ibn Hajar, he says that the hadith, that the khabar means more general than the hadith, right? He says, قَالَ حَافِظ بَيْنَهُمَا وَمُمْنُ وَخُصُوص مُطْلق. Right? They have things that they share and things that from one way they're the same and one way they're different. So every every hadith is a khabar. But not every khabar is a hadith. Right? So a khabar applies to it all, but a hadith only applies to the Prophet.
إما أن يكون له طرق الصوت كالمطريق والمراد بالطريق الإسناد والإسناد كما عرفه الحافظ لأنه حكاية طريق المتن.
Jay. So like we said, Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar, he said in his book, Al-Khabar is that which has turuq, right? Turuq. The word turuq in Arabic, Shaykh Abdul-Karim, he says, is the plural of tariq. Tariq, right? A path, a road, right? And what is intended by tariq here is the isnad, right? So Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar, he says that the khabar will either have a turuq. What is meant by turuq? The isnad. What is the isnad? He says the isnad, as Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar, he said, Hikayatu tariq al-matin. The isnad is the telling of the way that you get to the metin. Right? Does everybody remember what the word metin means? We talked about it in the introduction when we talked about the science of hadith. When we say metin, what are we talking about? We're talking about the wordage of the hadith. The metin is the wordage of the hadith. Right? And the way you get to the metin is what? Is the isnad. Right? Or the sanad. And the isnad is the telling of that. Right? So telling how you get to the metin is the isnad. I'm going to give you an example. Say something. Something, right? Abdul-Hakim said that Abu Salim said, that Harun said, that Hara said something. When I'm telling you this is called the isnad. Me telling you how I got to the metin. What Harun said, what Hara said was the metin. This is the wordage of the hadith. And me telling you that is what is known as the isnad. Right? Telling how you got to the metin, or telling the way that leads to the metin is the isnad. It's the chain, right? But he's going to mention it, but there's a difference between the word isnad and sanad. The sanad is the chain itself, but the isnad is telling about that chain, right? So like isnad, I would say asnid hadith. Tell me the chain of your hadith. But the chain is just what it is, right? So when we say isnad, what is the isnad? We just said it. What's the isnad? Telling how you got to the metin, right? Hikayatu and tariq al-matn. Mentioning or stating the path you took to the matn. Stating the path you took to get to the matn. What's the matn? The narration itself, right? These things are important. That's why we go so slow on it. The matn is the narration, right? The statement of the Prophet, the action of the Prophet, the description of the Prophet, the allowance of the Prophet. This would be the matn, right? The Prophet said this. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ is the matn, right? What's the isnad? Telling how you got to that matn, right? So, going back, Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar, he says, Al-Khabar will either have paths that have no limit. Abdul-Hakim al-Khubayr, he says the word turuq is the plural of tariq. And what does he mean when he says path here, tariq? He means the isnad. And what is the isnad? Say it. Telling how you got to the matn. Right? Shaykh Abdul-Hakim al-Khubayr, hafidhahullah, he says, in the word isnad, oh no, let's go back, right? Now.
الإسناد والسند قال المناوي لا يشك محدث أنهما مترادفان. إسناد الحديث وسند الحديث واحد، لأنه يطلق الإسناد هو المصدر على السند وهو الرجال الرواة، وإن كان الإسناد في الأصل المصدر الإسناد رفع الحديث إلى قائله.
Now, so this is going to clarify what we just said, right? So Abdul-Hakim al-Khubayr, he says that you have the isnad and the word sanad, right? He says that al-Munawi, he says that no one is in doubt that the two words are synonyms. The word isnad and the word sanad are synonyms. They're used interchangeably. Somebody could say, what? This is my statement trying to explain it. Somebody could say, what's the isnad of that hadith? Somebody could say, what's the sanad of that hadith? They're interchangeable. He goes on to say, because the isnad of the hadith and the sanad of the hadith are the same thing. Meaning that a person can use the word isnad and make the verbal noun of it be the word sanad. But the word sanad is the people in the chain, right? The people who narrate. So now we got three words, we got three definitions now, right? The isnad, hikayatu, tariq, al-matn, to tell us about how you got to the chain. The sanad is the rijal al-ruwat, the narrators in the chain. They are the sanad, right? They are the people in the chain, right? He says, so they can be used interchangeably, even though the word al-isnad originally is the action of listing how you got to the hadith, or attaching the hadith to the one who said it. But the important thing to understand, if you don't understand anything else from what we said, is, what is the isnad? Telling how you got to the matn, right? What's the sanad? It's the narrators themselves, right? It's a little bit of a difference between them, right? But you can use them interchangeably, right? The first hadith we have to remember in our hadith class is the hadith Arba'in al-Nawawi, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, right? Somebody say, what's the isnad? Right? Bukhari said that Al-Humaydi said, right? This is the isnad. Or it's the sanad. We can use them interchangeably. But the isnad linguistically means to tell how you got to that matn. So I would say to you, for example, asnid hadith. List the chain of your hadith. And you would say the sanad of my hadith is so and so on so and so. You see? So that's what we need to understand so far.
عرف الإسناد بأنه حكاية طريق المتن، كما عرف السند بقوله الطريق الموصلة إلى المتن.
So here he's just re-emphasizing, he gives it to you in a better way. So he says, Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar, he defines the isnad by saying it's to narrow or to tell the path leading to the matan, to state the path leading to the matan. And he defines the sanad, and you should write this down, he defines the sanad to be the actual path that leads to the matan. Right? So if you know one, you know them both. The isnad is to state the path that leads to the matan. Hikayatu tariq al-matan. And the sanad is the tariq al-musilati ila al-matan. The actual path that leads to the matan. So there's a small difference in between them, but they can still be used as synonyms.
الطريق الموصل إلى المتن. ولو قال قائل إن الإسناد والسند سند الحديث وإسناده بمعنى واحد، وهو عبارة عن الرجال الذين يذكرهم المحدث مبتدئا بشيخه منتهيا بالنبي عليه الصلاة والسلام، لكان أوضح ولا إشكال فيه إن شاء الله تعالى.
No. So he says, so if a person says that the isnad of the hadith or the sanad of the hadith, right, they can both mean the same thing. Right? And what is meant by this is the people that he mentions, starting with his sheikh, ending with the Prophet. Right? This is what is meant by the sanad. The people that the muhaddith mentions, starting with his sheikh, the one who taught him, ending with the Prophet. And if he used that word, i.e. the word sanad, regarding this, it would have been clearer. But there's no harm either way. So just to make it clear again, right? The khabar will either have a sanad with no limit to its amount, right? Or it will have a sanad with a limit to its amount. And the word sanad means the path that leads to the matan. What's the word matan mean again? The narration itself. The sanad is the path that leads to the matan. What's the isnad? Telling, like stating the path of how you got to the matan. Right? Can the word sanad and matan be used as synonyms? Exactly. Right? Very simple.
بلا عدد معين على الصحيح، بل تكون العادة قد أحالت تواطؤهم على الكذب، وكذا وقوعه منهم اتفاقا من غير قصد.
Now, so he says, Ibn Hajar, al-khabar, right, will either have turuq, and when we said turuq, we mean what? No, isnads. Right. When we say turuq, what is he talking about? He's talking about isnads, right? Asanid. So the khabar will either have asanid bila adad mu'ayyin, without any specified amount according to what's correct. Right? He's giving inference here, and Allah knows best, to the disagreement in what is the minimum amount for something to be mutawatir. And the correct opinion is that there's no limit to what something is to be mutawatir. There's no limit to the amount of change, right? We don't say if it's more than 3 or it's more than 10 or if it's more than 17. There's no limit to it. But what is important, as he goes on to say, is that it's impossible that they came together to fashion a lie, right? It is unreasonable that they came together to fashion a lie. This is what makes it mutawatir. It doesn't mean it has to have 3 chains, 5 chains, 7 chains. What is considered the correct opinion is that it's uncommon or unreasonable that they came together to fashion a lie, to fabricate a lie. Right? He's going to explain it more. So the khabar will either have chains without any limit. Right? There's no limit to how many there are. But what is important is that they haven't come together to fashion a lie. it is unlikely that they came together to fashion a lie. I want to give you a little background before going on so we can understand the statement of the Sheikh even clearer. You're in America. There's another guy in China. There's a guy in Africa, a guy in New York, a guy in Australia. None of you all ever met. And if I ask each of you, what's the first surah in the Quran, what will y'all say? Al-Fatiha, right? Is it reasonable that y'all got together to fashion this lie, to come together and make up a lie about it? It's not reasonable. These 5 people never met. They're in different parts of the world. They speak different languages, right? So even though it's only 5 chains, it's unreasonable that they came together to fashion a lie. So we don't specify a minimum amount, right? It doesn't have a limit to how many chains are needed. But what's important is that they haven't come together, or it's unlikely that they came together to fashion a lie, right? So a khabar is that which comes with no limit to the amount of chains it has, right? No limit meaning in plenty, or no limit meaning that we don't specify a minimum amount.
هذا الخبر إذا نقله عدد جمع من غير حصر، عدد غير محصور، وهذا العدد تحيل العادة تواطؤهم على الكذب لأن لا يتفقوا عليه، لأنه لا يمكن أن يجتمع 100 فيتواطؤون على نقل خبر ليس بالصحيح.
Now, so he says, so this, he's explaining it more. So this khabar, if it was transmitted by a large group of people, a large group that has, it's uncountable, right? And this information that they transmitted, it is unlikely or it's unreasonable commonly that they came together to make up a lie, then this is what the first type of khabar is, right? And he says, we don't, it doesn't mean it could be 100 who narrate the same thing. I'm sorry. He says, so for example, you might have 100 people come together to make up a hadith, right? That doesn't necessarily necessitate it being authentic, right? 100 people got together and made up the same statement. Is that from this group? Is that from this first group? We say no, right? Because it's possible that this group got together to make up the lie. What's important is that this amount, this unrestricted amount, it's unlikely that they came together to fashion a lie.
نعم، لا يمتنع أن يجتمع 100 شخص أو أكثر فينقلون خبر أصله مكتوب لأنهم اجتمعوا في مكان واحد وبلغهم أو سمعوا هذا الخبر من معلم أو من خطيب أو ما أشبه ذلك، ثم هؤلاء لا يحصل بهم التواتر لأنه يحتمل أنهم تواطؤوا على نقل هذا الخبر المكتوب، أو يجتمع فئام من الناس أهل بلد يكون في أنفسهم شيء على أميرهم أو على قاضيهم ثم يذهبون لرفع أمره إلى الإمام الأعظم، فلا يمتنع أن هؤلاء وإن كثر عددهم أن يختلقوا شيئا وتهما يتهمونه بها ليكون مبررا لعزله.
Now, right, so he's just explaining that more and more, and he's going to give some examples. He says, so it's not about the number. 100 people can get together to make up a lie, and that doesn't necessarily make it authentic, right? He says, once you get 100 people, does that automatically make it so that they couldn't have made it up? He says, no. It's not impossible that 100 individuals or more can get together and transmit a statement that the foundation of this statement was fabricated. The foundation of this statement was a lie. For example, they could all gather in one place, and they could all be listening to or being informed with this statement from one teacher or one khatib or things similar to this. And then these individuals they don't reach the level of being mutawatir, right? Remember we said the mutawatir is that which has no limit to the amount of chains it has, meaning that, right? So these individuals, even though there are 100, it's not mutawatir. Why? Because they were all in the same place being taught by the same person, right? So they don't reach the level of being mutawatir. Because it's possible that they got together and transmitted this information that was a lie in its foundation. Or for example, they could come together, a large group of people in the same country, and they have a problem with their ruler or with their judge. And then they go to the one who is in charge, to the higher Imam, and it's not unlikely or it's not implausible that these individuals, even though their number is great, can come together to make up a lie and to make up an accusation that will justify them in their statements. So when we talk about mutawatir, right, that which doesn't have a limit to the amount of chains it has, what we should better say is that which the amount of chains needed is not specified, right? Because it's not about it, is it 100, is it 200, is it 20, is it 25, is it 10, is it more than 3? What is important is that they didn't come together on a lie. Or that it's unlikely that they came together on a lie, because in these situations he just listed, they could have come together on a lie. So a khabar is that which has no minimum amount of chains, or that which has no limit to the amount of chains it has, right? That which has no limit to the amount of chains it has. Then he's going to give us an example of how some people came together to fashion a lie.
كما اجتمع بنو أسد على سعد بن أبي وقاص وقالوا لعمر أنه لا يحسن أن يصلي، لا يمكن أن يتواطؤوا على مثل هذا الخبر تحقيقا لما يريدون. لكن لو جاء شخص من المشرق وآخر من المغرب وثالث من الجنوب ورابع من الشمال وآخر من بلد كذا وجاء من 20 بلد، 20 شخص أو 30 شخص أو 100 شخص وأخبروا بأن هذا الخبر كذا، نعم، هؤلاء لا يمكن أن يتواطؤوا على الكذب. ما اتفقوا ولا زوروا في أنفسهم كلاما يتفقون عليه، مع أنه لا يمتنع أن يتلبس الشيطان لسمع وإن كانوا في بلدان متباينة.
No. Jay, so he says, so we understand the difference when we're talking about mutawatir. I'm just saying this as a background. When he talks about mutawatir, it's that which has no limit to the amount of chains it has, meaning that it's not a specific amount needed. Right? He says, because an example of how a large group of people can come together to fashion a lie is that which is the story of Banu Asad, when they came to complain about Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas to Umar. Right? A whole tribe of people came together to complain about Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas to Umar. And they said that he doesn't, deserve to lead the prayer, right? He doesn't know how to pray well. So it's not impossible that this group of individuals came together to make up this statement in order to establish their goals. But he says, but if an individual is to come from the east, and one from the west, and another from the south, and another from the north, and another from this country or that country, right? And then it came 20 from this country, and 20 from this country and 30 from that country, or 100 from this place, right? And they all tell the same information, right? Then we say that these individuals, it's not probable that they came together to fashion a lie. It's not possible, it's not likely that they came together to fashion a lie. And since they all agree in what they're saying, it's not likely that they came and made up this falsehood amongst themselves, right? Instead, the fact that they all agree in this statement, even though they come from various places, shows that they weren't coming together to fashion a lie. So this is the difference when we talk about mutawatir, right? So a khabar has no limit to the amount of chains needed. But what's important is that it's unlikely that they came together to fashion a lie. And this is known as mutawatir. It's unlikely that they came together to fashion a lie, even if it's 5 people, right? Even if it's 10 people, even if it's 17 people, Even though there might be a hadith that has 100 people narrating it, we don't say it's mutawatir. Why? Because they all got it from the same place. But if it's unlikely that they came together to fashion this lie, or to fashion a lie, then we say it's mutawatir, right? And that's what he means when he says a khabar will either have a turuq or a sanid that have no minimum amount, right? They have no limit to the amount needed. Then he goes on to say, but we also need to pay attention to the fact that it's not impossible that the shaitan can confuse people from varying places, right? So just because you came from Bosnia, he came from America, it's possible that you two can make up, be mistaken the same way, or both say the same falsehood, right? So it's not just about the fact that you come from different places, but it's about the fact that you come from different places and different backgrounds and different things that make it unlikely that you came together to make up a lie.
يلبس عليهم ويلقي في روعهم كذا يأتي إليهم في المنام ويقول إن كذا كذا.
He said the shaitan, so it's possible that these individuals, the shaitan might confuse them and send inside of them some type of falsehood. So he would come to them, for example, while they're sleeping and say such and such.
ولذا لا بد أن يكون مستند الخبر إلى شيء محسوس على ما سيأتي شرحه.
Now, he says, and for that reason, the foundation of this type of khabar, right, talking about the mutawatir, it has to be from something physical. It has to be from something physical, as is going to come the explanation. Right, for something to be mutawatir, the people have to say things like, we heard such and such say, right, or such and such told us. It has to be on something physical, right? So I just want to recap all of that. It should be fairly simple because we're saying it over and over again. But when we talk about the khabar, the first type of khabar has no limit to the amount of chains. What do we mean by that? There's no limit to the amount of narrators, meaning that there's no limit, there's no minimum requirement. Right, we don't have to specify a certain amount. Because some people say the mutawatir, you have to have at least 10. If you don't have at least 10, it's not mutawatir. We say, well, we can find a mutawatir with 7, and we can find a narration with 10 that's not mutawatir. Right? So, it has no minimal amount. It has no specific amount, i.e. no specific amount is needed to make it mutawatir. What is important in making it mutawatir? Yeah. For it to be mutawatir, what do we need to pay attention to? The amount, right? Not the amount, but what? Mumtaz. It's not feasible that they came together to fabricate a lie, right? And that is done by the fact that they come from different places, they have different backgrounds, they speak different languages, so forth and so on, right? But they still say the same thing and they agree in what they're saying, then that makes it mutawatir. But that doesn't just mean that just because they come from different places, that it's mutawatir, because the shaitan might confuse people from different places. Therefore, for it to be mutawatir, it has to be based on something physical and tangible. And he's going to explain this more. So for example, I'm in St. Louis, Abu Salim is in Boston. And Shaitan wa comes to me in a dream and says that, if you do this, if you stand on your forehead, you'll get 100 rewards. And then Shaitan comes to Abu Salim in Boston with the same dream. If you stand on your head, you'll get 100 rewards. And he comes to Hadis in Bosnia. If you stand on your head, you'll get 100 rewards, right? And then we all start telling people that. Is this mutawatir? Right? It's not mutawatir, even though we're from different places, we speak different languages, because it's not based on something tangible. Right? Or instead of that, say that the Prophet said if you do this, you'll get 100 rewards, right? It's not, but if Hadith says that I heard such and such tell me, that such and such told him, that such and such said to him that the Prophet said, and Abu Salim says the same thing with another chain, and I say the same thing with another chain, that if you do this, you get that, and we say, no, that's mutawatir. Because it's not possible that these individuals came together to fabricate this lie, because it's based on direct transmission. It's not based on, the possibility of it being cut off or the possibility of it coming from somewhere unreliable. It has to be based in foundation.
بل تكون العادة قد حال تواطؤهم على الكذب وكذا وقوعهم منهم اتفاقا من غير قصد، ومنهم من عين العدد المطلوب للتواتر في الأربعة، وقيل في الخمسة، وقيل في السبعة، وقيل في العشرة، وقيل في الأربعين، وقيل في السبعين، وقيل غير ذلك، ولا دليل على واحد منها.
Now, he says, right? So just to summarize it in one final statement, he says, so what is important is that it is unlikely that they have come together to fashion or fabricate a lie. And likewise, it is unlikely that this thing has occurred from them, this agreement has occurred from them mistakenly without intention. Right? It is unlikely that they come together to fashion a lie. And it's also unlikely that they both made the same mistake. This is what we're looking at to make something mutawatir. It's unlikely that they came together to fabricate it on purpose. Come on, let's make up this statement, let's make up that statement. And it's also unlikely that they agree in this thing or they've said the same statement unintentionally mistaken. You make the same mistake that I make, and you make the same mistake that we made, and everybody here is making the same mistake, even though we're from other countries. We say that's not possible. What if me and Abu Salim said that Abu Muawiyah said Schnooks is on grand? It's possible we're both making the same mistake. But if everybody says that he says that Schnooks is on grand, it's not likely that they're making the same mistake. So the mutawatir, right, is that which is unlikely that they came together to fashion a lie. And it's just as unlikely that they agree on something mistakenly, without intention. Right? And he says in some of the scholars, they make the condition of something being mutawatir that it have at least 4 chains. Some of them say it has to have at least 5 chains, like 5 completely different chains. Some of them says that it needs to have 7. Some of them says it needs to have 10. Some of them says it needs to have 40. Some of them says it needs to have 70. And they say other things, but there's no evidence for any of that. Right? Some of them say you got to have 3 people in each level of the chain. So 3 people have to take it from 3 people who took it from 3 other people, right? And it keeps going spread out that way. He said no. Some say you got to be 4, some 5, 7, right? But there's no evidence for any of that. What is important is that it's unlikely that they came together to fashion a lie on purpose, or that they mistakenly, or that it's unlikely that they come together mistakenly on the same thing.
تمسك كل قائل بدليل جاء فيه ذكر ذلك العدد فأفاد العلم، وليس بلازم أن يضطرد في غيره الاحتمال الاختصاص. ثم يعود الكلام عن خبر المتواتر بعد أن يتمم اللفظ، فيقول أو ما أحصتم بما فوق 2، وسيأتي الكلام على المراد به وهو المشهور، أو بهما وهو العزيز وسيأتي الحديث عنه، أو بواحد وهو الغريب وسنتحدث عنه إن شاء الله تعالى.
No. Right? So he says, and each of the people who make these different minimum amounts, they all try to use certain things as evidence. And they try to say that, this minimum amount is what's needed to make something to have knowledge of something. This is something going into like kalam, like if one person tells you something, does it benefit knowledge or not? And we'll get into this later. But all of these people who mention these different things, they try to make it that this minimum amount is what's needed for this statement to benefit knowledge, for it to be certain about it. You can't be certain about it until these 4 people said it, or until these 7 people said it, or until these 20 people said it, right? He says, وَلَيْسَ بِلَازِمًا يَطْلُبْ فِي غَيْرِهِ لِإِحْتِمَالِ اخْتِصَاص, right? And they say it's not necessary that this be the case in everything other than that amount due to the وَلَيْسَ بِلَازِمًا. But the things that they claim are not necessarily the case, because like we said, it can be 100 people coming together to make something up. So just that minimum amount doesn't necessitate the fact that it's certain that it's truthful. Then he says, after he talks about generally what the different types of khabar are, he's going to go back and talk about mutawatir again, right? Because Ibn Hajar, first he talks about it in general, then he talks about it in detail. So he says that the khabar will have no minimum amount or no specific amount of asani, no specific amount of chains. All right, what do we mean by that? That the khabar will have no specific amount of chains. Right? It's not a minimum amount of needed to make it mutawatir. What's needed to make it mutawatir? That it's a physical transmission, but we said two things. Not that they just didn't have the intention, but it's unlikely that they came together to make a lot. Exactly. It's unlikely that they made the same mistake, right? It's unlikely that they came together to make a lie, and it's unlikely that they made the same mistake. Right now, all of us, we could say, you know what? When Abu Muawiyah comes tomorrow, or when Sa'id comes tomorrow, we're going to say, no, Jummah was yesterday, right? And he's going to say what? Right? How many people are here? It's about 10 people, right? Is it possible that we came together to make that up? You say, yeah, that's possible that y'all came together to make that up, right? So it's not mutawatir. But let's say Sa'id comes tomorrow, right? And let's say tonight was Jumu'ah. Tonight is Jumu'ah, but yesterday was Jumu'ah. And I come and say, what you doing? Yesterday was Jumu'ah. And then somebody from out of town comes and says, why y'all praying Jumu'ah? Yesterday was Jumu'ah. And then somebody from out of town, another place comes and says, why y'all praying Jumu'ah? Yesterday was Jumu'ah. Right? After all these people come from different places and got all of these people, you're going to have to say what? It's unlikely that they came together to make up this lie. And it's unlikely that they all made the same mistake. Maybe if one person comes from out of town and says yesterday was Jumu'ah, and another person comes, somebody comes from Kansas City, somebody comes from Raleigh, and they both say yesterday was Jumu'ah, you say, well, maybe they both made the same mistake, right? But then somebody comes from New York, lands, and says, no, yesterday was Jumu'ah, today's Saturday, right? This is what we're looking at. It's unlikely that they came together to make the lie, and it's unlikely that they made the same mistake. So when he says the khabar has no limit to the amount of chains, i.e. no limit to the amount of chains needed. We don't say it needs to be 40. Doesn't need to be 70, because 40 can still be a lot. 70 could still be a lot. But what's important is that it's unlikely that they came together to fashion a lie, and it's unlikely that they all made the same mistake. Then he says, or it will have a specific amount. Right? The khabar will have chains that have a specific amount. And so they have a specific amount more than 2. Either be 3, 5, 7, 8, 18, 800, but they haven't reached the level of being mutawatir. Right? If I tell you that Ibn Hajar says that the chain will have a specific amount more than 3, right? This is my statement to you, right? This is a khabar. And then you all go on and transmit that. Is that mutawatir? Right? Because it's possible y'all all heard it in the same place. But it's still more than 2 chains. Right, you got Muslim, you got Hajj, you got Harun, you got Ali, you got right, all these people. So it's not mutawatir because y'all got it from the same place. But since it's more than 2, we call it mashhur. It's famous. It's not mutawatir, but it's famous. Right? It's mashhur. Or it has only 2 chains. Right? This is called aziz. Only 2 people got that information from the source. Right? Only Abu Salim and Haris were paying attention. Only 2 people got the information from the source. This is known as aziz. Right? Or only one person got the information. Like there's only one chain. This is known as gharib. Right? Aziz is rare. Gharib is uncommon or strange. Right? So let's. I wish I had a board. We could set an example on the board. Right? Aziz is, at every point in the chain, there are only 2 people. Like that's why it's called Aziz, because it's rare that you'll find a hadith like that. Where at every level, there are only 2 people. So the Prophet narrated a hadith, and only 2 Sahabi got it. In each of these 2 Sahabi, 2 people narrate on them. And of each of these 2 people, only 2 people narrate on them. And of each of those 2 people, only 2 people narrate on them until the hadith was recorded, right? We would say that hadith is Aziz. That's why they call it aziz, because it's rare. It's almost, you'll never find a hadith that has only 2 people in every spot of the chain. A mashhur, every spot in the chain, there's more than 2. Right? So the Prophet said it, 4 Sahaba took it. Right? And these 4 Sahaba, 3 took from Abu Bakr, 6 took from Umar, 8 took from Uthman, 7 took from Ali. Right? So it's more than 2 in each of those levels. And then each of the levels under those people have 3 or more people in each of, 3 or more people in each of those levels. This is known as mashhur. Because it's a large amount, it's famous. Everybody narrates it, but it hasn't reached the level of being mutawatir. Or you have gharib, which is that at some point in time in the chain, there's only one person. At some point in time in the chain, there's only one person. So one sahabi took it from the Prophet, right? Or one sahabi, a lot of people took it, but from this sahabi, only one person took it, right? So at some point in time in the chain, there's only one person. So this is the types of khabar. Mutawatir, there's no minimum amount needed. What's important is that they didn't come together to fashion a lie, right? Or they didn't, or it's unlikely that they made the same mistake. Mashhur has more than 2 people in every level of the chain. Aziz, only 2 people in every level of the chain. In gharib, only one person at some level in the chain. Right? So, let's see how far does he go into mutawatir, mutawatir. Alright, so we'll stop at that inshallah, because now he's going to get into the details of what makes something mutawatir. Right now we just basically got the definition of mutawatir. Right? What do you say? العادة قد أحالت تواطؤهم على الكذب وكذا وقوعه منهم اتفاقا من غير قصد. Right? It is uncommon or unlikely that they have all come together to fashion a lie, or that they've all said the same thing unintentionally mistaken. Right? So, I just want to recap what we did today. And like we said, we take it so slow, but the point is that we can know these things. What's a khabar? Hadith. That's one opinion. What else? Yeah, like different than a hadith. A khabar is only the Prophet. A hadith is only the Prophet, and the khabar is not the hadith and other people. No, that's what I'm saying. You said it's the opposite. The opposite. Like you got the hadith, it's not the Prophet. It's just everybody else. Or the third opinion is, right, the Prophet and others. It includes everybody. Right. This is a khabar. All right. The khabar is one of 4 types. What's the first type? Mutawatir. What does it mean to be mutawatir? There's no specific amount needed for it. That's not what it means though. What does it mean to be mutawatir? That's correct. There's no minimal amount needed. But what makes it mutawatir? Not just widespread, huh? Right? It's unlikely that they came together to fabricate it. Or it's just unlikely that they all said the same thing mistaken. This is mutawatir. It's unlikely that they came together to fabricate. And it's unlikely that they all made the same mistake. This is mutawatir. And there's no minimum amount. Right? It could be 7, it could be 4, it could be 13. Right? So that's what he means when he says bila adadin mu'ayyan. It has no minimal amount. It has a lot, but there's no minimum needed. As long as they haven't come together to fashion a lie, or it's unlikely that they came together to fashion a lie, and it's unlikely that they all made the same mistake, then this is mutawatir. That's the first type of khabar. What's the second type of khabar? Mashhur. What's mashhur? Not more than 3, but not less than 2, but in between them is more than 2. More than 2, right? 3 or more. More than 2 in every aspect of the chain. At no point in time in the chain is there anything less than 3, right? So when the Prophet said it, he's the meta, right? When we look at, we gather all the chains, we see that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said a statement, and 3 Sahaba took it, right? And from those 3 Sahaba, 3 other people took it. And in every spot in the chain, there's no less than 3. We say that that's called mashhur. What if at some point in time in the chain it fell into being 2? It's aziz, right? And some people say aziz has to have 2 in every spot of the chain, right? But we'll get into that when we talk about aziz. What if at some point in time in the chain it fell to only 1? Gharib, right? So the types of khabar are 4. Mutawatir, mashhur, aziz, gharib. J. What's the isnad? Exactly. Hikayatu tariq al-matan. Telling the path you took to get to the matan. What's the matan? The narration itself, right? What's the sanad? Right? It can be a synonym to the isnad, but we said there's a difference. The sanad is the actual path, and the isnad is the telling of that path. Right? You see the difference of that? Like I say, the sanad, like I say, okay, what's the isnad? What's the sanad of your hadith? Right? Like the hadith we took, we go back to the hadith of إنما الأعمال بالنيات. Bukhari, right? حدثنا حميدي, حدثنا سفيان أن يحيى أخبرني محمد أن سمع يحيى بن أبي علقمة بن وقاص يقول, right? So we got these 5 people: Bukhari, Humaydi, Sufyan, Yahya, Muhammad, Alqam, right? This is the sanad, right? Those people are the sanad, right? Umar, we had Umar, right? These people are the sanad. But the isnad is me telling you that, right? So there's a difference between the two, right? The isnad is more of the action, while the sanad is more of just what it is. But we can use them interchangeably, right? But the more accurate statement, right? If you want somebody to tell you the sanad, you say, tell me the isnad, right? Right? Asnid, right? Mention the isnad, mention the sanad. And if you want somebody to, just know what the sanad is, you say the word sanad, right? Jay, so we talked about the types of khabar, or the meaning of khabar. We talked about the meaning of the word matan. We talked about the meaning of the word al-isnad. We talked about the meaning of the word sanad. And we talked about the mutawatir, or should I say the types of khabar. The mutawatir, no minimum amount needed, as long as it's unlikely that they came to fashion a lie, or made the same mistake. The mashhur, 3 or more in every aspect of the chain. If at some point in time it falls to 2, then it's aziz. And if at some point in time it falls to 1, then it's gharib. Alright, any questions about what we talked about today? We'll stop at 46, 45. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. You said what? Yeah, popular, yes. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.